Ah, the rat!
And I'm at so. Oh, hello everyone. Right, so as always, my name is SkitterSkreetch. You could call me Skitter, and welcome to the library. That's a good cam phrase, I should use that more. Right, okay, so working through my normal laundry list of things. No new followers since last stream. All the new ones were thanked in the stream, so I don't have to do that. No badges to promote today. Because I can't think. I feel like I should do like bigger badges for the Torrid Tuesday stuff because it's going to be like longer term things. But there's no way to do badges so you get credit for them across different things without it being a continuous period. So yeah, we're probably just going to do a big one at the end, which gives them some more time to figure out what the themes are and a good motif for them. So that's nice. Plague is hit first. So as always, we go up to check mark number 3.
Ah, the rat!
Hey Fitz, good to have you. Good to have you. That's Plague's first, so that's marked. There you go. Yeah. And then we got to do our little bit of time filling where I figure out. Hey, good to have you. I'm not taking suggestions today, so I will not be eating cheese. But I do appreciate the food. Yeah, so. Time filling. Okay, so last time we was here, we were talking about magical rings. In a sort of roundabout, back and forth sort of way, where I wound up saying absolutely nothing about the actual nature of rings, which I think was fun. And yeah, you're the second highest number on there, right after Abbe, and Abbe is not a fair person to compete with because Abbe is some sort of wizard. Rusty, she says, yeah. How many marks is that now? That's Yeah, it's only 16, yeah. Which, given that there have been 21 totals, well, I guess that does mark 3 weeks since we started doing that. Huh? But yeah, you currently hold more than 2/3 of them. So I've got to figure out something to do with those. Like, there should be some sort of long-term prize for them. Maybe I should. At some point, I am going to unlock VRP, so I guess maybe I'll give that out. Although Abe is already a mod, which I think doesn't stat with VRP, so I don't know. We'll figure something out. Oh wait, that's a very dumb idea. I could make special badges and have a secret stream where I only tell people who are high up on the rankings about it. That'd be fun. Not like it's a sub invite only, but I privately message you that I'm going to be live. Well, I guess that would cut other people's streaks. Maybe not. I don't know. We'll figure something out. Well, I'm happy to have you here too. That goes for all of you too. I do appreciate you turning up. But yeah, so magic rings. I've got to talk about them today because I was very, very kind of mean about it by ending when I did yesterday. So, like I said yesterday, there's ones that just hold gems. We're not going to talk about them. We're going to talk about the rings themselves. It's magic. And magic rings are sort of odd because their nature is sort of circular things, means that they are, well, circles, I guess, which I think is significant because it denotes a boundary. Like you always see in stories and stuff, you know, you got people drawing circles on the floor and like pentagrams and some of things in them. But because it's a container, it can be used to delineate an outside and an inside area, which means that if you're wearing it, it can delineate you as the inside area, right? Basically, because you're the only thing that would be inside it at all. So they tend to be able to do stuff that's a bit more complex than you expect for something of their size, at least from what I can gather. Because magic rings tend to do they tend to be a bit more how'd you put it? Detailed, complex than your average item. Generally, the bigger a magical item is, the weirder it can be, because there's more space for like runes and other ideas, right? But because these have an inbuilt sort of outside and inside thing, you can just apply an effect that would normally cause problems to the interior. So, for example, the classic example, an invisibility thing. It's hard to do something that makes you invisible normally, because you have to detect, you know, what are you making invisible? You have to describe all that stuff, and so it has to be pretty big. I think Lamp's talked about cloaks that do that, and generally how they work is they just make one side of the cloak blend in with the round. But a ring can also do it. Apparently it's fiddly, but there is like a box of a couple dozen rings of invisibility that's just sitting in one particular storage area that I happen to know of. It occurs to me I should have stolen one of them. That'd be useful. Like, they wouldn't fit me, but I'm sure I could like make some. No, I'm gonna make a note. Where's my pen paper here? Steel ring visibility. Okay, we'll do that later. A bit for off stream, though. Yeah, but yeah, they can do things like that. So what they specialise in is basically bounded effects, basically where there's an internal and an external, and they're affecting the internal, so they're good for things that are on you. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only use of them, because it can be an external effect too. Another one that's pretty common for magic rings is protection. So you have like something that detects things that are outside and puts a shield against them. Rings is good for that. Now the problem, of course, is that these, you know, with cast rings specifically, all these advantages can go the other way, because it can detect you in your entirety as being inside the circle. Anything that might be done with a magical circle could be done with the ring. For example, binding is a pretty classic one. If you put a ring on someone that has a binding on it, not only is it very easy to make it so that you can't take the ring off, which, you know, could be nasty in and of itself after a while, but then you can have it so that it limits a person's actions and movement. For example, if you forbid something inside of a zone, you can forbid that on the ring, which means that if you were, well, how would you say, if you were inclined to be like the fellow who made the ring that's on the 49th floor, you could forbid breathing inside of an area. And then someone who puts the ring on can't take it off and can't breathe. Particularly nasty piece, that. It's not very low down because it's just basic, but yeah. That's a cruel one. What else can you do? There are some that are sort of, I mentioned that some cursed items are well intentioned, but that don't really function. And there's what I think is supposed to be a failed ring of not invisibility, immortality, that's down on I think somewhere in the 70s, which it doesn't allow decay inside of a circle. Which, when you put the ring on, means that you basically stop being. Like moving around and doing stuff takes decay. It damages you. You know, like you put strain on your joints and all that. So, to exist in the world, to act, you need to be able to decay. And so it's the little like it's got so the way some of these things are displayed, they've got like a little museum plaque underneath them, and then they're behind whatever case. And this one is labelled the Prism Ring because it basically doesn't allow you to do anything. You don't die because you can't die. Like the necrosis that would normally come from being unable to breathe and whatever doesn't happen. But you can't do anything at all. Now this one, because it's not meant to be cursed, you can take it off. Well, you can't, but someone can take it off you pretty easy. But yeah, that's a scary one. It basically just puts you somewhere, and you know, then time passes. Which I guess it's sort of like going to sleep, but with no guarantee of how long you'll be down. Are there any other notable ones? I mean, I guess they're all. Well, there's another class of them really, which is, again, because there's this containing thing, you can trap things inside a ring. So it's not uncommon for there to be like some sort of demon or something trapped inside of a ring that becomes almost a mind of this magical item. I'm sort of loath to call these magic rings because they're almost like their own thing, right? It's not that the ring itself is magical that makes it bad. It's the sort of the magic is binding the demon or whatever, but the demon being there, when you put it on, you're basically putting yourself inside of a magic circle with a demon, right? Which is basically an invitation to get possessed at that point. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's any. I don't know. I mean, the problem is, I think the problem really is that you're spoiled for choice a bit here. Right? Rings is a very common type of magical and cursed specifically item, and there's a lot of options out there that I could list. You know, I could list the one that, which there's a whole thing of ones that make you invisible but you can't see. There's one that which prevents air from entering near to you. There's one that prevents sound from happening, and like that one you wouldn't think would be like that one seems to work as intended, but apparently like not being able to hear anything at all drives people mad after a while. And then that one was like hit with a bind. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff. So like I don't know which ones are the interesting ones to talk about here really. But yeah, I think that's a good enough little overview. And if there's a lot of interest, I can go and find more particularly interesting ones. But yeah. Anyway, that's 10 minutes past the hour, which is our little limit for how long we have to be doing something. So yeah, we're going to be back to, as you should know by this point, our Torrid Tuesdays Jane Austen story by, which is our Jane Austen story by our Emma by Jane Austen. Which I'm hoping that most of you are familiar, but if you weren't here for the last couple, we are just about to start on chapter 10. And from what we know, Emma is the second daughter of a country gentleman who, having lost a friend to a marriage that she sort of, it was a good marriage, encouraged, but wasn't super fond of, has decided to play the matchmaker a bit more, that she's good at it. And so she has made a friend who is the natural born daughter of a gentleman, and she's trying to set her up, with the parish priest, who is a very desirable match and were very well born. They spent a lot of time, and he's been to frame a portrait that Emma did of this girl, and there's all sorts of stuff going on there. And basically, there's been some disagreement because this friend of Emma's, this natural born daughter, has rejected a proposal from, I'd say a gentleman farmer, but from just like a well-to-do young farmer who she was quite sweet on before Emma's influence, but who Emma has sort of been talking down to her, which annoyed Mr. Knightley, who is a respectable, I guess I was going to say a friend of Emma's. I don't know. It moved in the same circle, and they had a row about it. But yeah, and now Emma is hoping to secure this match with the other gentleman. So yeah, and that's where we're at. I'll have a quick swallow of water before we start, and then we'll begin. There we are. Now, as always, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, I'm always happy to hear them. If you've missed something, either because I've stumbled over it, or you've had a little bit of lag and you've missed it, or just because I haven't read it very clearly, feel free to let me know and I'm happy to go back over it. But unless anyone has any questions, then without further ado, if you are all sitting comfortably, then I shall begin. Chapter 10. Though now the middle of December, there had yet to be the weather to prevent the young ladies from tolerably regular exercise. And on the morrow, Emma had a charitable visit to pay to a poor sick family who lived a little way out of Arbury. Their road to this detached cottage were down Vicarage Lane, a lane leading at right angles from the broad, the irregular main street of the place, and, as may be inferred, containing the blessed abode of Mr Elton. A few inferior dwellings were at first to be passed, and about a quarter of a mile down the lane rose the vicarage, an old and not very good house, almost as close to the road as it could be. It had no advantage of situation, but had been very much smartened up by the present proprietor, and, such as it were, there could be no possibility of the two friends passing it without a slackened pace and observing eyes. Emma's remark were, "There it is. There you go in your riddle book one of those days." Harriet's was, "Oh, what a sweet house. How very beautiful. There are the yellow curtains that Miss Nash admires so much." Gonna pause for a moment here before I press on. Just I forgot to mention, but this vicar, Mr Elton, submitted a little riddle to a book they're putting together, which had to do with courtship, which is what the reference is. Should have mentioned that. Let me press on. "I do not often walk this way now," said Emma, as they proceeded, "but then there will be an inducement, and I shall gradually get intimately acquainted with all the hedges, gates, pools, and pollards of this part of Highbury." Harriet, she found, had never in her life been within this side of the vicarage. Or she had been within inside the vicarage, and her curiosity to see it was so extreme that, considering exteriors and probabilities, Emma could only class it as a proof of love with Mr Elton's seemingly ready wit in her. I wish we could contrive it," says she, "but I cannot think of any tolerable pretence for going in. No servant that I want to inquire about of his housekeeper, no message from my father." She pondered, but could think of nothing. After a mutual silence of some minutes, Harriet thus begun again. "I do so wonder, Miss Woodhouse, that you should not be married or going to be married, so charming as you are." Emma laughed and replied, "My being charming, Harriet, is not quite enough to induce me to marry. I must find other people charming. Not one other person at least. And I am not only not going to be married at present, but have very little intention of ever marrying at all." "Ah, so you say, but I cannot believe it. I must see somebody very superior to anyone I have seen yet to be tempted. Mr Elton, you know," she said, recollecting herself, "is out of the question. I do not wish to see any such person. I would rather not be tempted. I cannot really change for the better. If I were to marry, I must expect to repent it." "Dear me, it's so odd to hear a woman talk so. I have none of the usual inducements of women to marry. Were I to fall in love, indeed, it would be a different thing. But I never have been in love. It is not my way or my nature, and I do not think I ever shall. And without love, I am sure I should be a fool to change such a situation as mine. Further, I do not want employment. I do not want consequence. I do not want, I believe, few married women as half as much mistress of their husband's house as I am of Hertford. And never could I expect to be so truly beloved and important, so always first and always right in any man's eyes as I am in my father's. But then, to be an old maid at last, like Miss Bates, that is as formidable an image as you could present, Harriet. And if I thought I should ever be like Miss Bates, so silly, so satisfied, so smiling, so prosing, so undistinguished and unfastidious, and so apt to tell everything relative to everybody about me, I would marry tomorrow. Between us, I am convinced there never can be any likeness except in being unmarried. But still you would be an old maid, and that's so dreadful. Never mind, Harriet. I shall not be a poor old maid, and it is poverty only which makes celibacy contemptible to a generous public. A single woman with a very narrow income must be a ridiculous, disagreeable old maid, the proper sport of boys and girls. But a single woman of good fortune is always respectable, and may be as sensible and pleasant as anybody else. And the distinction is not quite so much against the candour and common sense of the world as appears at first. For a very narrow income has a tendency to contract the mind and sour the temper. Those who can barely live, and who live perforce in very small and generally very inferior society, may well be illiberal and cross. This doesn't apply, however, to Miss Bates. She is only too good-natured and too silly to suit me. But in general, she is very much to the taste of everybody, though single and though poor. Poverty certainly has not contracted her mind. I really believe if she had only a shilling in the world, she would be very likely to give away sixpence of it. Nobody is afraid of her. That is a great charm. Dear me, and what shall you do? How shall you employ yourself when you grow on? If I know myself, Harriet, mine is an active, busy mind, with a great many independent resources, and I do not perceive why I should be more in want of employment at 40 or 50 than 1 and 20. Women's usual occupations of eye and hand and mind will be open to me then, as they are now, with no important variation. If I draw less, I shall read more. If I give up music, I shall take to carpet work. And as for objects of interest, objects for the affections, which in truth is the greatest point of inferiority, the want of which is really the great evil to be avoided in not marrying, I shall be very well off with all the children of a sister I love so much to care about. There will be enough of them in all probability to supply every sort of sensation that declining life can need. There will be enough for every hope and every fear, and though my attachment to none can equal that of a parent, it suits my ideas of comfort better than what is warmer and blinder. My nephews and nieces. I shall often have a niece with me. Do you know Miss Bates' niece? That is, I know you must have seen her 100 times. But are you acquainted? Oh, yes, we are always forced to be acquainted whenever she comes to Highbury, by the by. That is almost enough to put me out of conceit with a niece. Heaven forbid, at least that I should ever bore people half so much about all the Knightleys together as she does about Jane Fairfax. One is sick of the very name of Jane Fairfax. Every letter from her is read 40 times over. Her compliments to all friends go round and round again. And if she does but send her aunt the pattern of a stomacher, or knit a pair of garters for her grandmother, one hears of nothing else for a month. I wish Jane Fairfax very well. She tires me to death. They were now approaching the cottage, and all idle topics were superseded. Emma were very compassionate, and the distress of the poor were as sure of relief from her personal attention and kindness, her counsel and her patience, as from her purse. She understood their ways, could allow for their ignorance and their temptations, had no romantic expectations of extraordinary virtue from those for whom education had done so little, entered into their troubles with ready sympathy, and always gave her assistance with as much intelligence as goodwill. In the present instance, it was sickness and poverty together that she come to visit, and after remaining there as long as she could give comfort or advice, she quitted the cottage with such an impression of the scene as made her say to Harriet as they walked away, "These are the sights, Harriet, to do one good. How trifling they make everything else appear. I feel now as if I could think of nothing but these poor creatures all the rest of the day, and yet who can say how soon it may all vanish from my mind?" "Very true," said Harriet. "Poor creatures. One can think of nothing else." "And really, I do not think the impression will soon be over," said Emma, as she crossed the low edge, tottering footsteps which ended the narrow, slippery path through the cottage garden, and brought them into the lane again. "I do not think it will." Stopping to look once more at the outward wretchedness of the place, and recall the still greater within. "Oh dear no," said her companion. They walked on. The lane made a slight bend, and when that bend were passed, Mr Elton were immediately in sight, and so near as to give Emma time only to say further, "Ah, Harriet, here comes a very sudden trial of our stability and good thoughts." "Well," she said, smiling, "I hope it may be allowed that compassion has produced exertion and relief to the sufferers. It has done all that is truly important. If we feel for the wretched enough to do all we can for them, the rest is empty sympathy, only distressing to ourselves." Harriet could just answer, "Oh, dear, yes," before the gentleman joined them. The wants and suffering of the poor family, however, were the first subject of meeting. He had been going to call on them. His visit he would now defer. They had a very interesting parley about what could be done and should be done. Mr Elton then turned back to accompany them. To fall in with each other on such an errand as this, thought Emma. To meet in the charitable scheme. This will bring a great increase of love on each side. I should not wonder if it were to bring out the honour declaration. It must, if I were not here. I wish I were anywhere else. Anxious to separate herself from them as far as she could, she soon afterwards took possession of a narrow footpath, a little raised on one side of the lane, leaving them together in the main road. But she had not been there 2 minutes when she found that Harriet's habits, dependence, and imitation would bring her up too, and that, in short, they would both be soon after her. This would not do. She immediately stopped, on the pretence of having some alteration to make in the lacing of her half boot, and stooping down in complete occupation of the footpath, begged him to have the goodness to walk on, and she would follow in half a minute. They did as they was desired, and by the time she judged it reasonable to have done with her boot, she had the comfort of further delay in her power, being overtaken by a child from the cottage, setting out, according to orders, with her picture to fetch broth from Hartfield. To walk by the side of this child and talk to and question her were the most natural thing in the world, or would have been the most natural, had she been acting just then without design, and by this means the others were still able to keep her head, without any obligation of waiting for her. She gained on them, however, involuntarily. The child's pace were quick, and theirs rather slow, and she was the more concerned at it from their being evidently in conversation which interested them. Mr. Elton was speaking with animation, Harriet listening with a very pleased attention, and Emma, having sent the child on, beginning to think how she might draw back a little more when they both looked around and she were obliged to join them. Mr. Elton was still talking, still engaged in some interesting detail, and Emma experienced some disappointment when she found that he were only giving his fair companion an account of yesterday's party at his friend Cole's, and that she would come in herself for the Stilton cheese, the North Wiltshire, the butter, the celery, the beetroot, and all the dessert. This would soon have led to something better, of course, was her consoling reflection. Anything interests between those who love, and anything will serve as introduction to what is near the heart, if I could have but kept longer away. They now walked on together quietly, till within view of the vicarage pales, when a sudden resolution of at least getting Harriet into the house made her again find something very much amiss about her boot, and fall behind to arrange it once more. She then broke the lace off short, dexterously throwing it into a ditch, and presently obliged to entreat them to stop, and acknowledge her inability to put herself to rights, so as to be able to walk home in tolerable comfort. "Part of my lace is gone," she said, "and I do not know how I am to contrive. I really am a most troublesome companion to you both, but I hope I am not often so ill-equipped. Mr. Elton, I must beg leave to stop at your house, and ask your housekeeper for a bit of ribbon or string, or anything, just to keep my boot on." Mr. Elton looked all happiness at this proposition, and nothing could exceed his alertness and attention in conducting them into his house, and endeavouring to make everything appear to advantage. The room where it was taken to was the one he chiefly occupied, and looking forwards, beyond it were another, which it immediately communicated. The door between them were open, and Emma passed into it with the housekeeper to receive her assistance in the most comfortable manner. She was obliged to leave the door ajar, as she found it, though she fully intended that Mr. Elton should close it. It were not closed, however, and it still remained ajar. By engaging the housekeeper in incessant conversation, she hoped to make it practicable for him to choose his own subject in the adjoining room. For 10 minutes she could hear nothing but herself. It could be protracted no longer. She was then obliged to be finished and make her appearance. The lovers were standing together at one of the windows. It had a most favourable aspect, and, for half a minute, Emma thought the glory of having schemed successfully. But it would not do. He had not come to the point. He had been most agreeable, most delightful. He had told Harriet that he had seen them go by, and had purposely followed them. Other little gallantries and allusions had been dropped, but nothing serious. Cautious, very cautious, thought Emma. He advances inch by inch, and will hazard nothing till he believes himself secure. Still, however, though everything had not been accomplished by her ingenious device, she could not but flatter herself that it had been the occasion of much pleasant enjoyment to both, and must be leading them forward to the great event. And that's the end of chapter
The
10.
rat.
Hey, Ivy. Good to have you. You just come in at the end of chapter 10 of Jane Austen, which consisted of Emma and Harriet, our little friend. Good to have you. Going to visit some sick people over by the vicarage of Mr Elton, whom Emma is trying to set up Harriet with, and then running into the man on the way back. And Emma then taking several attempts to contrive a reason for the two of them to walk a little further ahead, ending with her snapping her own bootlace and throwing it to the side so that she had an excuse for them to visit his house and go hang out with the housekeeper and get it repaired while they were allowed to talk. But it's all led to nothing, unfortunately, and that's where we're at. I must admit, I do think that was quite a clever little contrivance there. Just the deliberate damaging of the shooter, making it an excuse. For everything that I think Emma is getting wrong about this whole thing, she is a very clever and very talented person, and you can see why people admire her in the story. But anyway, I'll have a quick swallow of water and then we'll press on. Right-o. Chapter 11. Mr Elton must now be left to himself. It was no longer in Emma's power to superintend his happiness or quicken his measures. The coming of her sister's family was so very near at hand, at first in anticipation, and then in reality, it became henceforth her prime object of interest. And during the 10 days of their stay at Hartfield, it was not to be expected, she did not herself expect, that anything beyond occasional fortuitous assistance could be afforded by her to the lovers. They might advance rapidly, if they would, however. They must advance somehow or other, whether they would or no. She hardly wished to have more leisure for them. There are people who, the more you do for them, the less they would do for themselves. Mr and Mrs John Knightley, from having been longer than usual absent from Surrey, were exciting, of course, rather more than the usual interest. Till this year, every long vacation since their marriage had been divided between Hartfield and Donwell Abbey, but all the holidays of this autumn had been given the sea bathing for the children, and it were therefore many months since they had been seen in regular way by their Surrey connections, or seen at all by Mr Woodhouse, who could not be induced to get so far as London, even for poor Isabella's sake, and who consequently were now most nervously and apprehensively happy in forestalling this too short visit. He thought much of the evils of the journey for her, and not a little of the fatigues of his own horses and coachman, who were to bring some of the party the last half of the way. But his alarms were needless. The 16 miles being happily accomplished, and Mr and Mrs John Knightley, their 5 children, and a competent number of nursery maids, all reaching Hartfield in safety. The bustle and joy of such an arrival, the many to be talked to, welcomed, encouraged, and variously dispersed and disposed of, produced a noise and confusion which his nerves could not have borne under any other cause, nor have endured much longer even for this. But the ways of Hartfield, and the feelings of her father, were so respected by Mrs John Knightley, that in spite of maternal solicitude for the immediate enjoyment of her little ones, and for their having instantly all the liberty and attendance, all the eating and drinking and sleeping and playing which they could possibly wish for, without the smallest delay, the children were ne'er allowed to be a long disturbance to him, either in themselves or in any restless attendance on them. Mrs John Knightley were a pretty, elegant little woman, of gentle, quiet manners, and a disposition remarkably amiable and affectionate. Wrapped up in her family, a devoted wife, a doting mother, and so tenderly attached to her father and sister that, but for these higher ties, a warmer love might have seemed impossible. She could never see a fault in any of them. She was not a woman of strong understanding or any quickness, and with this resemblance of her father, she inherited also much of his constitution, was delicate in her own health, over careful of that of her children, had many fears and many nerves, and was as fond of her own Mr Wingfield in town as her father could be of Mr Perry. There was a like, too, in a general benevolence of temper, and a strong habit of regard for every old acquaintance. Mr John Knightley were a tall gentlemanlike, and very clever man, rising in his profession, domestic and respectable in his private character, but with reserved manners which prevented his being generally pleasing, and capable of being sometimes out of humour. He was not an ill-tempered man, not so often unreasonably cross as to deserve such a reproach, but his temper was not his great perfection, and indeed, with such a worshipping wife, it was hardly possible that any natural defects in it should not be increased. The extreme sweetness of her temper must hurt his. He had all the clearness and quickness of mind which she wanted, and he could sometimes act ungracious, or say a severe thing. He was not a great favourite with his fair sister-in-law. Nothing wrong in him escaped her. She was quick in feeling the little injuries to Isabella, which Isabella never felt herself. Perhaps she might have passed over them more had his manners been flattering to Isabella's sister, but they were only those of kindly brother and friend, without praise and without blandness. But hardly any degree of personal compliment could have made her, regardless of that great fault of all her. But hardly any degree of personal compliment could have made her, regardless of that great fault of all in her eyes, which he sometimes fell into, the want of respectful forbearance towards her father. There he had not always the patience that could have been wished. Mr. Woodhouse's peculiarities and fidgetiness were sometimes provoking him to a rational remonstrance or sharp retort equally ill bestowed. It did not often happen, for Mr. John Knightley had really a great regard for his father-in-law, and generally a strong sense of what was due to him, but it too often for Emma's charity, especially as there were all the plain of apprehension frequently to be endured, though the offence came not. The beginning, however, of every visit displayed none but the properest feelings, and this being a necessity so short, might be able to pass away in unsullied cordiality. They had not been long seated and composed when Mr. Woodhouse, with a melancholy shake of the head and a sigh, called his daughter's attention to the sad change at Hartfield since she had last been there. "Ah, my dear," said he, "poor Miss Taylor, it is a grievous business. "Oh, yes, sir," she cried with ready sympathy. "How you must miss her, and dear Emma too. What a dreadful loss to you both. I have been so grieved for you. I could not imagine how you could possibly do without her. It is a sad change indeed. But I hope she is pretty well, sir." "Pretty well, my dear, I hope, pretty well. I do not know but that the place agrees with her tolerably." Mr. John Knightley here asked Emma quietly whether there were any doubts of the air of Randalls. "Oh, my, no, none in the least. I never saw Mr. Weston better in my life. Never looking so well. Papa is only speaking of his own regret." "Very much to the honour of both," was the answer replied. "And do you see her, sir, tolerably often?" asked Isabella, in the plaintive tone which just suited her father. Mr. Woodhouse hesitated. "Not near so often, my dear, as I would wish." "Oh, Papa, we have missed seeing them but one entire day since they married. Either in the morning or evening of every day, excepting one, have we seen either Mr. Weston or Mrs. Weston, and generally both, either at Randalls or here. And as you may suppose, Isabella, most frequently here. They are very, very kind in their visits. Mr. Weston is really as kind as herself, Papa. If you speak in that melancholy way, you will be giving Isabella a false idea of us all. Everybody must be aware that Miss Taylor must be missed, but everybody ought also to be assured that Mr. and Mrs. Weston do really prevent our missing her by any means to the extent we ourselves anticipated, which is the exact truth." "Just as it should be," said Mr. John Knightley, "and just as I hoped it was from your letters. Our wish of showing you attention could not be doubted, and his being a disengaged and social man makes it all easy. I have been always telling you, my love, that I had no idea of the change being so very material to Harriet Hartfield as you apprehended. And now you have Emma's account, I hope you will be satisfied." "Why, to be sure," said Mr. Woodhouse. "Yes, certainly. I cannot deny that Mrs. Weston, poor Mrs. Weston, does come and see us pretty often, but then she is always obliged to go away again." "It would be very hard upon Mr. Weston if she did not, Papa. You quite forget poor Mr. Weston." "I think, indeed," said John Knightley pleasantly, "that Mr. Weston has some little claim. You and I, Emma, will venture to take the part of the poor husband. I being a husband, and you not being a wife, the claims of the man may very likely strike us with equal force. As for Isabella, she has been married long enough to see the convenience of putting all the Mr. Westons aside as much as she can." "Me, my love?" cried his wife. "Hear and understand and only in part? Are you talking about me? I am sure nobody ought to be, or can be, a greater advocate for matrimony than I am. And if it had not been for the misery of her leaving Hartfield, I should never have thought of Miss Taylor but as the most fortunate woman in the world. And as to slighting Mr. Weston, that excellent Mr. Weston, I think there is nothing he does not deserve. I believe he is one of the very best-tempered men that ever existed. Excepting yourself and your brother, I do not know his equal for temper. I shall never forget his flying Henry's kite for him that very windy day last Easter, and ever since his particular kindness last September, 12 months in writing that note, at 12 o'clock at night, on purpose to assure me there was no scarlet fever at Cobham, I have been convinced there could not be a more feeling heart, nor a better man in existence. If anybody can deserve him, it must be Miss Taylor." "Where is the young man?" said John lightly. "He has been here on this occasion, or has he not?" "He has not been here yet," replied Emma. "There was a strong expectation of his coming soon after the marriage, but it ended in nothing, and I have not heard him mentioned lately." "Then you should tell them of the letter, my dear," said her father. "He wrote a letter to poor Mrs. Weston to congratulate her, and a very proper, handsome letter it was. She showed it to me. I thought it very well done of him indeed. Whether it was his own idea, you know, one cannot tell. He is but young, and his uncle, perhaps." "My dear papa, he is 23. You forget how time passes." 23, is he indeed? Well, I could not have thought it, and he was but 2 years old when he lost his poor mother. Well, time does fly indeed, and my memory is very bad. However, it was an exceedingly good, pretty letter, and gave Mr. and Mrs. Weston a great deal of pleasure. I remember it was written from Weymouth, and dated September 28th, and began, "My dear Madame," but I forget how it went on. And it was signed F.C. Weston Churchill. I remember that perfectly. "How very pleasing and proper of him," cried the good-hearted Mrs. John Knightley. "I have no doubt of his being a most amiable young man. But how sad it is that he should not live at home with his father. There's something so shocking in a child's being taken away from his parents at a natural home. I never can comprehend how Mr. Weston could part with him. To give up one's child. I really never could think well of anybody who proposed such things to anybody else." "Nobody ever did think well of the Churchills, I fancy," observed Mr. John Knightley coolly. "But you need not imagine Mr. Weston to have felt what you would feel in giving up Henry or John. Mr. Weston is rather an easy, cheerful-tempered man, and a man of some feelings, or man of strong feelings. He takes things as he finds them, and makes enjoyment of them somehow or other, depending, I suspect, much more upon what is called society for his comforts. That is, upon the power of eating and drinking, and playing, whilst with his neighbours playing whist with his neighbours 5 times a week, than upon family affection, or anything that home affords." Emma could not like what bordered on a reflection on Mr. Weston, and half a mind to take it up, but she struggled and let it pass. She would keep the peace if possible, and there was something honourable and valuable in the strong domestic habits, the all-sufficiency of home to himself, which resulted her brother's disposition to look down upon the common rate of social intercourse on those to whom it were important. It had now claimed the forbearance. And that's the end of chapter 11. I shall pause here to have a swallow of water. And then we shall press on. Chapter 12. Mr. Knightley would have done with them, rather against the inclination of Mr. Woodhouse, who did not like anyone should share with him in Isabella's first day. Oh, fair enough, a stretch it is. Probably for the best. I do spend too much time hunched over books. There we are. Thank you for that. Now, where was we? Mr. Knightley would have dined with them, rather against the inclination of Mr. Woodhouse, who did not like that anyone should share with him in Isabella's first day. Emma's sense of right, however, had decided it, and beside the consideration of what were due to each brother, she had particular pleasure from the circumstances of the late disagreement between Mr. Knightley and herself, in procuring him the proper invitation. She hoped they might now become friends again. She thought it would time to make up. Making up, indeed, would not do. She certainly had not been in the wrong, and he would never own that he had. Concession must be out of the question, but it would time to appear to forget that they had ever quarrelled, and she hoped it might rather assist in the restoration of friendship, that when he came into the room, she had one of the children with her. The youngest, a nice little girl of about 8 months old, were now making her first visit to Hartfield, and very happy to be danced about in her aunt's arms. It did assist, for though he began with grave looks and short questions, he was soon led on to talk of them all in the usual way, and to take the child out of her arms with all the unceremoniousness of perfect amity. Emma felt they was friends again, and the conviction given her at first great satisfaction, and then a little sauciness, she could not help saying, as he were admiring the baby, "What a comfort it is, when we think alike about our nephews and nieces. As men to women, our opinions are sometimes very different. With regard to these children, I observe we never disagree." "If you were as much gilded by nature in your estimation of men and women, and as little under the power of fancy and whim in your dealings with them, as you are when these children are concerned, we might always think alike." "To be sure. Our discordancies must always arise from my being in the wrong." "Yes," he said, smiling, "and reason good. I was 16 years old when you were born." "A material difference, then," she replied, "and no doubt you were much my superior in judgment at that period of our lives. But does not the lapse of 21 years bring our understanding a good deal nearer?" "Hey, Naska, good to have you. We have just passed on to chapter 12 of Emma, having done chapter 10, in which Emma and Harriet visit a poorhouse where someone is sick, and run into the vicar, Mr. Weston, and are invited into his house after Emma contrives to accidentally on purpose break one of her boots and need it to be repaired. And then chapter 11, which is the arrival of Emma's sister and her family at Hartfield, and the introduction of the family. And currently we are just before the dinner, where the other Mr. Knightley has been invited to meet with his nephews, and Emma is now sniping at him over the disagreement they had last time we was reading. "Does not the lapse of 21 years bring our understanding a good deal nearer?" "Yes, a good deal nearer." "And still not near enough to give me a chance of being right, if we think differently?" "I have still the advantage of you by 16 years' experience, and by not being a pretty young woman and a spoiled child. Come, my dear Emma, let us be friends, and say no more about it. Tell your aunt, little Emma, that she ought to set you a better example than to be renewing old grievances, and that if she were not wrong before, she is now." "That's true," she cried, "very true. Little Emma, grow up a better woman than your aunt. Be infinitely cleverer and not half so conceited. Now, Mr. Knightley, a word or two more, and I have done. As far as good intentions went, we were both right, and I must say that no effects on my side of our argument have yet proved wrong. I only want to know that Mr. Martin is not very, very bitterly disappointed." "A man cannot be more so," was his short, full answer. "Ah, indeed, I am very sorry. Come, shake hands with me." This had just taken place, and with great cordiality, when John Knightley made his appearance, and "How do you do, George?" and "John, how are you?" succeeded in the true English style, bearing under a calmness that seemed all but indifference, the real attachment which would have led either of them, if requisite, to everything for the good of the other. They even were quiet and conversable, as Mr. Woodhouse declined cards entirely for the sake of comfortable talk with his dear Isabella, and the little party made two natural divisions. On one side he and his daughter, on the other the two Mr. Knightleys, their subjects totally distinct, or very rarely mixing, and Emma only occasionally joining in with one or the other. The brothers talked of their own concerns and pursuits, but principally of those of the elder, whose temper were by much the most communicative, and who were always the greater talker. As a magistrate, he had generally some point of law to consult John about, or at least some curious anecdote to give, and as a farmer, as keeping in hand the house farm at Donwell, He had to tell what every field were to bear next year, and he gave all such local information as could not fail of being interesting to a brother whose home it had equally been the longest part of his life, and whose attachments were strong. The plan of a drain, the change of a fence, the felling of a tree, and the destination of every acre for wheat, turnips, or spring corn were anything that was as much equality of interest by John and as cool a man as rendered possible. And if his willing brother ever left him anything to inquire about, his inquiries even approached a tone of eagerness. While they was thus comfortably occupied, Mr. Woodhouse was enjoying a full flow of happy regrets and fearful affection with his daughter. "My poor dear Isabella," said he, fondly taking her hand, and interrupting for but a few moments her busy labours for some one of her 5 children. "How long it is, how terribly long since you were here, and how tired you must be after your journey. You must go to bed early, my dear, and I recommend a little gruel to you before you go. You and I will have a nice basin of gruel together. My dear Emma, suppose we all have a little gruel." Emma could not suppose any such thing, knowing, as she did, that both the Mr. Knightleys were as unpersuadable on that article as herself, and 2 basins only was ordered. After a little more discourse in praise of gruel, with some wondering at its not being taken every evening by everybody, he proceeded to say, with an air of grave reflection, "It was an awkward business, my dear, your spending the autumn at Southend instead of coming here. I never had much opinion of the sea air." "But Mr. Wingfield most strenuously recommended it, sir, or we should not have gone. He recommended it for all the children, but particularly for the weakness in little Bella's throat, both sea air and bathing." "Ah, my dear, Berry had many doubts about the sea doing her any good, and to myself I have long been perfectly convinced. Though perhaps I never told you so before, that the sea is very rarely of use to anybody. I am sure it almost killed me once. Hey, Tanner, good to have you. We're currently on, well, partway through chapter 12 of Emma. Hey, Wild. Oh, right, I do still have the Eat Hardtack redeem up. I had completely forgotten about that. Alright, then I guess we'll take a quick break. I'll get out my tin of hardtack. Fair play to you. Right then. So for those of you who are not overly familiar with hardtack, sometimes known as ship biscuits or thrice cooked bread, is a type of long time preserved, basically ration, often used on sailing vessels and during wars, notably the Civil War. It is, I suppose you would say, most commonly watered down or cooked into something because it is of roughly the same consistency as a roofing tile. But yeah, but you saved up the 5,000 points, so let's have a little nibble, shall we? Pointy. Oh, absolutely not. No, that was dry. I'll have a drink of water afterwards because I'm not a masochist. But no, the whole point is to crunch it down completely unaltered. Which the stuff I have is enough to do that, but it is not a pleasant little treat. I'll say that much. Yeah. Plague, did you attack, Tenor? Good job, keep it up. But yeah, that is a redeem left over from when I read The Seawolf by Jack London, which I was doing as a bit. And yeah, congratulations, Tenor, for being the first one to redeem it. Well, I will make no bones here about whether justice is kept. If you have any problems, I have given Abbe a sword in the chat, so she is free to resolve any issues she likes in any way she sees fit. But I'm not ruling here. And I don't expect Abby, to be clear, I don't expect Abby to rule with any sort of justice or expect her to do anything. She just has a sword if she wants to use it. Yeah. Anyhow, oof. Yeah, I do appreciate you stopping by and saving up all your points for that, Tenor. I respect your dedication. Now I'll have one more swallow of water and we'll get back into it. Abby has a sword. I gave it to her because I trust her, and because I think it would be much better, and because I've got no one else to really give it to. Yeah. Which, to be clear, pretty much everyone, yeah, most everyone here I trust to the extent that I would give them a sword if I wanted to, but also I don't feel super comfortable asking people to be my mods. It was basically a bit. If anyone wants a sword, let me know. I'll give you one. I'm a lunatic. But what are we doing? Right. Oh yeah. So, for those of you who've just come in, we're halfway through chapter 12 of Emma. If you've seen the previous streams, you should be up to the end of chapter 9. Chapter 10 was Emma and Harriet visiting a poorhouse where someone was sick and having a run-in with the gentleman who Emma is trying to set Harriet up with and contriving an excuse to visit his house. Chapter 11 with the arrival of the family, and the first half of this chapter has had Mr. Knightley and Emma have a little bit of a sniping back and forth about their existing quarrel, but basically making up. And it's now them after dinner in sort of a little domestic scene with the family. So as you're all caught up. Oh, I was about to press on, but we are actually about 2 minutes from. Rest in peace, Blake. But yeah, we are about 2 minutes from the ad break, so actually this is probably a good time to stop and have a little chat if people want to chat. Yeah. Yeah. Safe travels. I'd be more concerned, but this is far from the first time this has happened. Yeah. Yeah, we do, like I said, we are about to go into ad, so I'll take a little moment to do some reflection on the book in general. So yeah, I'm still fairly convinced that Emma is setting Harriet up with Mr. Weston in error, and that Mr. Weston is taking the wrong impression. But yeah, and I still do like Mr. What's his name? Mr. Weston, Mr. Woodfield, as being like this ridiculous hypochondriac character. I think it's a very funny little notion to take. Yeah. What else did I say? I don't know. I always feel a bit awkward when I take a pause like this because I'm like, I'd never know what to say. But I guess if you guys have thoughts or questions about the text, or just redeems you'd like to pull, this is a good time to do them because, like I say, our break inside just under a minute now, so we got time. What else is there to say about it? I also will say again, really enjoy the sniping between Emma and Mr. Knightley. If you're going to be reading the Regency novel, the little snippets of very polite argument between characters are my favourite part personally. Even if this one is not quite as dramatic and excessive as the last one. And the question of sea air as being healing or not is another interesting one. I personally am quite partial to the theory that sea air itself wasn't helpful to people, but being outside of the houses, which used to be lined with, many unpleasant chemicals, especially in the fancy ones, was probably good for the health of the people who was taking the visit. Yeah. Anyway, we're about to head into an ad break, so I shall see you all on the other side. Well, feel free. Let's call it. If you want to save up for a secret, feel free. If you want to spend them, feel free. I intend to be doing this for long enough that you should be able to unlock all of the secrets I've got currently. But, yeah, to be clear, I do think that the sea can be very good for your health, especially for things like joint problems, where relaxing in a salt bath can take air pressure off them. I also just think the sea is good for the soul in sort of a general way. I think being able to see the ocean is just good for people. But yeah, it was also just a very long tradition of going to the seaside for your health. I know that Brighton was particularly noted for how'd you put it? For being a place you would go to visit for health. In fact, there was some sort I forget the name of it, but there was a pavilion built there by one of the princes as his residence to spend time down there. And yeah, it was a place considered very healing by a lot of people. Although another little side theory that I like about specifically like the Brighton area is the nature of sort of the south of England, and especially nearer the cliffs, like around Brighton Way, is that the water is very, very hard, contains a lot of limescale and a lot of chalk from the native soil. So it's very, very rich in calcium, which it takes a little bit of getting used to if you're not used to it. But it is pretty good for you, in a way, if you're lacking in calcium or other trace minerals that are pretty prevalent in the water. So that's another thing that might have led to improved health from visiting the seaside. And also Brighton nowadays is known as one of the most welcoming city to gay people in the UK. So another good reason to visit. I'm not sponsored by the Brighton Tourism Board or anything, but yeah, if you do want to go somewhere in the UK and you don't want to go to London because it's too crowded and expensive, it's an option. Sponsor me, Brighton. Give me money. Yeah. I'm trying to think, if there's anything else to say about the general practice? Don't think so. I just think that the ocean is... Oh, thank you kindly, NASCAR. I did not realise you were associated with the Brighton Board of Tourism.
I really wish it weren't cheese.
Oh, right. I forgot. Lamp gets all the money and I get cheese. Well, I appreciate it anyway. I didn't know you were associated with the Brighton Board of Tourism. I'll bear it in mind for the future. But yeah. I don't think I know anything else that is particularly interesting about the practice of visiting the seaside for your health. I mean, I'm sure there's something to be said for the air and that sort of thing. And I think travel can be good for people in general too, if only about getting out of the house. But with that, the ad break is ended. I think people have had time to take any redeems they were going to take. So I shall assume that none are incoming, and we shall get back to the text. Where were we? There we are. But my dear, Perry had many doubts about the sea doing her any good, and as to myself, I have been perfectly convinced, though perhaps I never told you so before, that the sea is very rarely of any use to anybody. I am sure it almost killed me once. Come, come, cried Emma, feeling this to be an unsafe subject. I must beg you not to talk of the sea. It makes me envious and miserable, I who have never seen it. Southend is prohibited, if you please. My dear Isabella, I have not heard you make one inquiry after Mr. Perry yet, and he never forgets you. Oh, good Mr. Perry. How is he, sir? Oh, pretty well, but not quite well. Poor Perry is bilious, and he has no time to take care of himself. He tells me he has no time to take care of himself, which is very sad. But he has always wandered all around the country. I suppose there is not a man in such practice anywhere, but then there is not so clever a man anywhere. And Mrs. Perry and the children, how are they? Do the children grow? I have a great regard for Mr. Perry. I hope he will be calling soon. He will be so pleased to see my little ones. I hope he will be here tomorrow, for I have a question or two to ask him about myself of some consequence. And my dear, whenever he comes, you had better let him look at little Bella's throat. Oh, my dear sir, her throat is so much better that I have hardly any uneasiness about it. Sorry, sir, I do not have a Discord, nor do I have any bots set up for commands. Either bathing has been of the greatest service to her, or else it is to be attributed to an extremely excellent embrocation of Mr. Wingfield's, which we have been applying at times ever since August. It is not very like me, my dear, that bathing should have been of use to her, and if I had known you were wanting an embrocation, I would have spoken to... You seem to have forgotten You seem to have forgotten Mrs. and Miss Bates, said Emma. I have not heard one inquiry after them. Oh, the good Bateses. I am quite ashamed of myself. But you mention them in most of your letters. I hope they are quite well. Good old Mrs. Bates. I will call upon her tomorrow and take my children. They are always so pleased to see my children. And that excellent Miss Bates. Such thorough worthy people. How are they, sir?
Why, pretty well, my dear, up on the whole. Poor Mrs. Bates had a bad cold about a month ago.
How sorry I am. But colds were never so prevalent as they have been this autumn. Mr. Wingfield told me that he had never known them more general or heavy, except when it has been quite an influenza.
That has been a good deal the case, my dear. Not to the degree you mention. Perry says that colds have been very general, but not so heavy, as he has often known them in November. Perry does not call it altogether a sickly season.
No, I do not know that Mr. Wingfield considers it very sickly, except...
Ah, my poor dear child. The truth is that in London it is always a sickly season. Nobody is healthy in London. Nobody can be. It is a dreadful thing to have you forced to live there, so far off, and the air so bad.
No, indeed. We are not at all in bad air. Our part of London is so very superior to most others. You must not confound us with London in general, my dear sir. The neighbourhood of Brunswick Square is very different from almost all the rest. We are so very airy. I should be unwilling, I own, to live in any other part of the town. There is hardly any other that I could be satisfied to have my children in. But we are so remarkably airy. Mr. Wingfield thinks the vicinity of Brunswick Square decidedly the most favourable as to air.
Ah, my dear, it is not like Hartfield. You make the best of it, but after you've been a week at Hartfield, you are all of you different creatures. You do not look like the same. Now, I cannot say that I think you are, any of you, looking well at present.
I am sorry to hear you say so, sir. But I assure you, excepting those little nervous headaches and palpitations, which I am never entirely free from anywhere, I am quite well myself. And if the children were rather pale before they went to bed, it was only because they were a little more tired than usual from the journey and the happiness of coming. I hope you will think better of their looks tomorrow, for I assure you Mr. Wingfield told me he did not believe he had ever sent us off altogether in such good case. I trust at least that you do not think Mr. Knightley, looking ill, turned her eyes with affectionate anxiety towards her husband.
Middling, my dear. I cannot compliment you. I think Mr. John Knightley very far from looking well.
What is the matter, sir? Do you speak to me? Cried Mr. John Knightley, hearing his own name. I am sorry to find, my love, that my father does not think you looking well, but I hope it is only from being a little fatigued. I could have wished, however, as you knew, that you had seen Mr. Wingfield before you had left home.
My dear Isabella, he exclaimed hastily, pray do not concern yourself about my looks. Be satisfied with doctoring and coddling yourself and the children, and let me look as I choose.
I did not thoroughly understand what you were telling your brother, cried Emma, about your friend Mr. Graham's intending to have a bailiff from Scotland to look after his new estates. Will it answer? Won't the old prejudices be too strong? And she talked in this way so long and successfully that, when forced to give her attention again to her father and sister, she had nothing worse to hear than Isabella's kind inquiry after Jane Fairfax. And Jane Fairfax, though no great favourite with her, in general, she were at that very moment very happy to assist and praise him. That sweet, amiable Jane Fairfax, said Mrs. John Knightley. It is so long since I have seen her, except now and then for a moment accidentally in town. What happiness it must be to her good old grandmother and excellent aunt when she comes to visit them. I always regret excessively on dear Emma's account that it cannot be more so at Highbury. But now their daughter is married, I suppose Colonel and Mrs. Campbell will not be able to part with her at all. She would be such a delightful companion for Emma. Mr. Woodhouse agreed to it all, but added, our little friend Harriet Smith, however, is just such another pretty kind of young person. You will like Harriet. Emma could not have a better companion than Harriet. I am most happy to hear it, but only Jane Fairfax one knows to be so very accomplished and superior, and exactly Emma's age. This topic was discussed very happily, and others succeeded of similar moment, and passed away with similar harmony. But the evening did not close without a little return of agitation. The gruel came and supplied a great deal to be said, much praise and many comments, undoubted decisions of its wholesomeness for every constitution, and pretty severe philippics upon the many houses where it were never met with tolerable. But unfortunately, among the failures which the daughter had to instance, the most recent, and therefore most prominent, were in her own cook at Southend, a young woman hard for the time, who never had been able to understand what she meant by basting a nice smooth gruel, thin but not too thin. Often as she had whispered it and ordered it, she had never been able to get anything tolerable. Here were a dangerous opening. "Ah," said Mr. Woodhouse, shaking his head and fixing his eyes on her with tender concern. The ejaculation in Emma's ear expressed, "Ah, there is no end of the sad consequence of your going to Southend. It does not bear talking of." And for a little while she hoped he would not talk of it, and a silent rumination might suffice to restore him to the relish of his own smooth gruel. After an interval of some minutes, however, he began with, "I shall always be very sorry that you went to the sea this autumn instead of coming here." "Why should you be sorry, sir? I assure you it did the children a great deal of good." "And moreover, if you must go to the sea, it had better not have been to Southend. Southend is an unhealthy place. Perry was surprised to hear you had fixed upon Southend." "I know there is such an idea with many people, but indeed it is quite a mistake, sir. We all had our health perfectly well there, never found the least inconvenience from the mud. And Mr. Wingfield said it is entirely a mistake to suppose the place unhealthy, and I am sure he may be depended on, but he thoroughly understands the nature of the air, and his own brother and family have been there repeatedly." "You should have gone to Cromer, my dear, if you went anywhere. Perry was a week at Cromer once, and he holds it to be the best of all the sea-bathing places. A fine open sea, he says, and very pure air. And by what I understand, you might have had lodgings there quite away from the sea, a quarter of a mile off. Very comfortable. You should have consulted Perry." "But my dear sir, the difference of the journey. Only consider how great it would have been. 100 miles, perhaps, instead of 40.
"Ah, my dear, as Perry says, where health is at stake, nothing else should be considered. And if one is to travel, there is not much to choose between 40 miles and 100. Better not move at all. Better stay in London altogether than travel 40 miles to get into worse air." This is just what Perry said. It seemed to him a very ill-judged measure.
Emma's attempts to stop her father had been vain, and when he had reached such a point as this, she could not wonder at her brother-in-law's breaking out. "Mr. Perry," said he, in a voice of very strong displeasure, "would do as well to keep his opinion till it is asked for. Why does he make it any business of his to wonder at what I do, at my taking my family to one part of the coast or another? I may be allowed, I hope, to use my judgment as well as Mr. Perry. I want his directions no more than his drugs." He paused, and growing cooler in a moment, added, with only sarcastic dryness, "If Mr. Perry can tell me how to convey a wife and 5 children a distance of 130 miles, with no greater expense or inconvenience than a distance of 40, I should be as willing to prefer Cromner to Southend as he could himself." "True, true," cried Mr. Knightley, with most ready interposition. "Very true. That's a considerable indeed. But, John, as to what I was telling you of my ideas of moving the path to Langham, of turning it more to the right that it may not cut through the home meadows, I cannot conceive any difficulty. I shouldn't have attempted if it were to be the means of inconvenience to the Highbury people. But if you call to mind exactly the present line of the path, the only way of proving it, however, will be to turn to our maps. I shall see you at the Abbey tomorrow morning, I hope, and then we will look them over, and you shall give me your opinion." Mr. Woodhouse was rather agitated by such harsh reflections on his friend Perry, to whom he had, in fact, though unconsciously, been attributing many of his own feelings and expressions. But the soothing attention of his daughter gradually removed the present evil, and the immediate alertness of one brother, and better recollections of the other, prevented any renewal of it. That's the end of chapter 13. I'll have a quick swallow of water. What I will say is this, that the degree to which Emma is doing emotional labour in that case is sort of remarkable, the sort of pulling away of disastrous and dangerous topics from the thing. It's interesting. But yeah. Other than that, I don't think there's much else to say on the topic. So, yeah, I shall instead press on with chapter 13. Chapter 13. There could hardly be an happier creature in the world than Mrs. John Knightley in this short visit to Hartfield, going about every morning among her old acquaintances with her 5 children, and talking over what she had done every evening with her father and sister. She had nothing notice otherwise, but the days did not pass so swiftly. It were a delightful visit, perfect in being much too short. In general, their evenings was less engaged with friends than their mornings. With one complete dinner engagement, and out of the house too, there were no avoiding, though at Christmas Mr. Weston would take no denial. They must all dine at Randall's one day. Even Mr. Woodhouse was persuaded to think it a possible thing, in preference to a diversion of the party. How there was all to be conveyed, he would have made a difficulty if he could, but as his son and daughter's carriage and horses was actually out Hartfield, he was not able to make more than a simple question on that head. It hardly amounted to a doubt, nor did it occupy Emma long to convince him they might in one of the carriages find room for Harriet also. Harriet, Mr. Elton, Mr. Knightley, their own especial set, were the only persons invited to meet them. The hours was to be early, as well as the number few, Mr. Woodhouse's habits and inclinations being consulted in everything. The evening before this great event, for it was a very great event that Mr. Woodhouse should dine out on the 24th of December, had been spent by Harriet at Hartfield, and she had gone home so much indisposed with a cold, that but for her own earnest wish of being nursed by Mrs. Goddard, Emma could not have allowed her to leave the house. Emma called on her the next day, and found her doom already signed with regard to Randall's. She was very feverish, and had a bad sore throat. Mrs. Goddard was full of care and affection. Mr. Perry was talked of, and Harriet herself was too ill and low to resist the authority which excluded her from the delightful engagement, though she could not speak of her loss without many tears. Emma sat with her as long as she could, to attend to her in Mrs. Goddard's unavoidable absences, and raise her spirits by representing how much Mr. Elton would be depressed when he knew her state, and left her at last tolerably comfortable in the sweet dependence of having a most comfortless visit, and of their all missing her very much. She had not advanced many yards from Mrs. Goddard's door when she was met by Mr. Elton himself, evidently coming towards him, and as they walked on slowly together in conversation about the invalid, of whom he, on the rumour of considerable illness, had been going to inquire that he might carry some report of her to Hartfield, was overtaken by Mr. John Knightley, returning from the daily visit to Donwell, with his 2 eldest boys, whose healthy, glowing faces showed all the benefit of a country run, and seemed to ensure a quick dispatch of the roast mutton and rice pudding they was hastening home for. They joined company and proceeded together, and were just describing the nature of her friend's complaint, her throat very much inflamed, with a great deal of heat about her, a quick low pulse, etc., and she was very sorry to find Mr. Goddard and Harriet were liable to be very bad sore throats, and often alarmed with them. Mr. Elton looked all alarm on the occasion, as he exclaimed, "A sore throat? I hope not infectious. I hope not of a putrid infectious sort. Has Perry seen her? Indeed, you should take care of yourself as well as your friend. Let me entreat you to run no risks. Why does not Perry see her?" Emma, who was not really at all frightened herself, tranquillised this excess of apprehension by assurances of Mrs. Goddard's experience and care. But as there must still remain a degree of uneasiness which she could not wish to reason away, which she would rather feed and assist than not, she added soon afterwards, as if quite another subject, "It is so cold, so very cold, and looks and feels so very much like snow, that if it were to any other place, or with any other party, I should really try not to go out today, and dissuade my father from venturing. But as he has made up his mind, and does not seem to feel the cold himself, I do not like to interfere, as I know it would be so great a disappointment to Mr. and Mrs. Weston. But upon my word, Mr. Elton, in your case I should certainly excuse myself. You appear to me a little hoarse already, and when you consider what demand of voice and what fatigue tomorrow will bring, I think it would be no more than common prudence to stay at home and take care of yourself tonight." Mr. Elton had looked as if he did not very know what answer to make, which was exactly the case. Though very much gratified by the kind care of such a fair lady, not liking to resist any advice of hers, he had not really the least inclination to give up the visit. But Emma, too eager and busy in her own previous conceptions and views to hear him impartially, or see him with clear vision, were very well satisfied with his muttering acknowledgment of it being very cold, certainly very cold, and walked on, rejoicing in having extricated himself from Randall's, and secured him the power of sending to inquire after Harriet every hour of the evening. "You do quite right," said she. "We will make your apologies to Mr. and Mrs. Weston." But hardly had she spoken so, when she found her brother would civilly offer him a seat in his carriage, if the weather were Mr. Elton's only objection. Mr. Elton actually accepting the offer with much prompt satisfaction. It were a dumb thing. Mr. Elton would go, and never had his broad handsome face expressed more pleasure than at this moment. Never had his smile been stronger, nor his eyes more exulting than when he next looked at her. "Well," she said to herself, "this is most strange, after I had got him off so well, to choose to go into company and leave Harriet ill behind. Most strange indeed. But there is, I believe, in many men, especially single men, such an inclination, such a passion for dining out. A dinner engagement is so high in the class of their pleasures, their employments, their dignities, almost their duties, that anything gives way to it. And this must be the case with Mr. Elton. Most valuable, amiable, pleasing young man, undoubtedly has very much love, and undoubtedly very much in love with Harriet, but still he cannot refuse an invitation. He must dine out whenever he is asked. What a strange thing love is. He can see ready wit in Harriet, but he will not dine alone for her." Soon afterward Mr. Elton quitted them, and she could not but do him the justice of feeling that there were a great deal of sentiment in his manner of naming Harriet at parting. In the tone of his voice, while assuring her that he should call at Mrs. Goddard's for news of her fair friend, the last thing before he prepared for the happiness of meeting her again, when he hoped to be able to give a better report. And he sighed and smiled himself off in a way that left the balance of approbation much in his favour. After a few minutes of entire silence between them, John Knightley began with, "I never in my life saw a man more intent on being agreeable than Mr. Elton. It is downright labour to him where ladies are concerned. With men he can be rational and unaffected, and when he has ladies to please, every feature works." "Mr. Elton's manners are not perfect," replied Emma. "Where there is a wish to please, one ought to overlook, and one does overlook a great deal. If a man does his best with only moderate powers, he will have the advantage over negligent superiority. There is such perfect good temper and good will in Mr. Elton as one cannot but value." "Yes," said Mr. John Knightley, presently, with some slyness. "He seems to have a great deal of good will towards you." "Me?" she replied, with a smile of astonishment. "Are you imagining me to be Mr. Elton's object?" "Such an imagination has crossed me, I own, Emma. And if it never occurred to you before, you may as well take it into consideration now." "Mr. Elton in love with me? What an idea!" "I do not say it is so, but you will do well to consider whether it is so or not, and to regulate your behaviour accordingly. I think your manners to him encouraging. I speak as a friend, Emma. You had better look about you and ascertain what you do and what you mean to do." "I thank you, but I assure you are quite mistaken. Mr. Elton and I are very good friends and nothing more." And she walked on, amusing herself in the consideration of the blunders which often arise from a partial knowledge of circumstance, of the mistakes which people of our pretension of judgment are forever falling into, and not very well pleased with her brother for imagining her blind and ignorant in want of counsel. He said no more. Mr. Woodhouse had so completely made up his mind to the visit that, in spite of the increasing coldness, he seemed to have no idea to shrink from it, and set forward at last most punctually, with his eldest daughter in his own carriage, with less apparent consciousness of the weather than either of the others, too full of the wonder of his own going and the pleasure it would afford at Randall's to see that it were cold, and too well wrapped up to feel it. The cold, however, was severe. By the time the second carriage were in motion, a few flakes of snow were finding their way down. The sky had the appearance of being so overcharged as to want only a milder air to produce a very white woe in a very short time. Emma soon saw that her companion were not in the happiest humour. The preparing and the going ahead in such weather, with the sacrifice of his children after dinner, were evils, but disagreeable at least, which Mr. John Knightley did not by any means like. He anticipated nothing in the visit that could be at all worth the purchase, and the whole of the drive to the vicarage was spent by him in expressing his discontent. A man, he said, must have a very good opinion of himself when he asks people to leave their own fireside and encounter such a day as this for the sake of coming to see him. He must think himself a most agreeable fellow. I could not do such a thing. It is the greatest absurdity. Actually snowing at this moment. The folly of not allowing people to be comfortable at home. And the folly of people not staying comfortably at home when they can. If we were obliged to go out such an evening as this by any call of duty or business, what a hardship we should deem it. And here we are, probably with rather thinner clothing than usual, setting forward voluntary, without excuse, in defiance of the voice of nature, which tells man, in everything given up to his view or feelings, to stay at home himself, and keep all under shelter that he can. Here are we, setting forward to spend $5 hours in another man's house, with nothing to say or hear that was not said and heard yesterday, and may not be said and heard again tomorrow. Going in dismal weather, to return probably in worse, 4 horses and 4 servants taken out for nothing but to convey 5 idle, shivering creatures into colder rooms and worse company than they might have had at home. Emma did not find herself equal to give the pleased assent, which no doubt you were in the habit of receiving, to emulate the "very true, my love," which must have been usually administered by his travelling companion. But she had resolution enough to refrain from making any answer at all. She could not be complying. She dreaded being quarrelsome. Her heroism reached only to silence. She allowed him to talk, and arranged the glasses, and wrapped herself up without opening her lips. They arrived, the carriage turned, a step were let down. Mr. Elton, spruce, black, and smiling, were with them instantly. Emma thought with pleasure of some change of subject. Mr. Elton were all obligation and cheerfulness. He was so very cheerful in his civilities, indeed, that she began to think he must have received a different account of Harriet from what had reached her. She had sent more dressing, and the answer had been much the same, not better. My report from Miss Goddard's, she said presently, was not so pleasant as I had hoped. Not better was my answer. His face lengthened immediately, and his voice with a voice of sentiment as he answered, "Oh, no. I am grieved to find I was on the point of telling you that when I called at Mrs. Goddard's door, which I did the very last thing before I returned to dress, I was told that Miss Smith was not better, by no means better, rather worse, very much grieved and concerned. I had flattered myself that she must be better after such a cordial as I knew had been given this morning." Emma smiled and answered, "My visitor was of use to the nervous part of her complaint, I hope, but not even I can charm away a sore throat. It is a most severe cold indeed. Mr. Perry has been with her, as you probably heard." "Yes, I imagined. That is, I did not. He has been used to her in these complaints, and I hope tomorrow morning will bring us both a more comfortable report. But it is impossible not to feel uneasiness. Such sad loss to our party today. Dreadful, exactly so, indeed. She will be missed every moment." This were very popular. The sigh which accompanied it were really estimable, but it should have lasted longer. Emma were rather in dismay when only half a minute afterwards he began to speak of other things, in a voice of the greatest alacrity and enjoyment. "What an excellent device," said he, "the use of a sheepskin for carriages. How very comfortable they make it. Impossible to feel cold with such precautions. The contrivances of modern days, indeed, have rendered a gentleman's carriage perfectly complete. One is so fenced and guarded from the weather that not a breath of air can find its way unpermitted. Weather becomes absolutely of no consequence. It is a very cold afternoon, but in this carriage we know nothing of the matter. Ha! Snows a little, I see." "Yes," said John Knightley, "and I think we shall have a good deal of it." "Christmas weather," observed Mr. Elton. "Quite seasonable, and extremely fortunate, we may think ourselves, that it did not begin yesterday and prevent this day's party, which it might very possibly have done. Mr. Woodhouse would hardly have ventured had there been much snow on the ground. But now it is of no consequence. This is quite the season indeed for friendly meetings. At Christmas everybody invites their friends about them, and people think little of even the worst weather. I was snowed up at a friend's house for 1 week. Nothing could be pleasanter. I went for only 1 night, and could not get away till that very day se'nnight." I'm not familiar with that term. That's se'nnight, S-E''N''N''R''G''H''T, which I'm guessing from context means the same day a week later, but you turned to me there. Mr. John Knightley looked as if he did not comprehend the pleasantness, and said only coolly, "I cannot wish to be snowed up weak at Randall's." Another time I might have been amused, but she was too much astonished now at Mr. Elton's spirits for other feelings. Harriet seemed quite forgotten in the expectation of a pleasant party. "We are sure of excellent fires," continued he, "and everything in the greatest comfort. Charming people, Mr. and Mrs. Weston. Mrs. Weston, indeed, is as much beyond praise, and he exactly what one values, so hospitable, and so fond of society. It will be a small party. Where small parties are select, they are perhaps the most agreeable of any. Mr. Weston's dining room does not accommodate more than 10 comfortably, and for my part I would rather, under such circumstances, fall short by 2 than exceed by 2. I think you will agree with me," he turned with a soft air to Emma. "I think I should certainly have your approbation, though Mr. Knightley, perhaps, from being used to the large parties of London, may not quite enter into our feelings." "I know nothing of the large parties of London, sir. I never dine with anybody." "Indeed?" In a tone of wonder and pity. "I had no idea the law had been so great a slavery. Well, sir, the time must come when you will be paid for all this, when you have a little labour and great enjoyment." "My first enjoyment," replied John Knightley, as they passed through the sweet gate, "will be to find myself safe at Hartfield again." That's the end of chapter 14. Well, I'll have a quick drink and then do a little reflection. There's something particularly cheeky in this chapter. Oh, that you kindly play. You're quite right, I have been hunched over too much. Oh, but yeah, there's something particularly cheeky in this chapter, wherein Mr. John Knightley mentions to Emma that she might, or that Mr. Elton might have an affection for her, and she then goes on to think about how sad it is that people who are generally very perceptive do miss so many things when they don't fully understand the whole picture of the situation. That's a little bit on the nose, but it is quite a little, it's a fun little aside, and I appreciate it. I think it's quite clever. Oh, hydrate, alright. Fair enough. I'll have another one. You're good, Elf. Yeah. It is also interesting to see the sort of reflection on the nature of parties. It's strange, actually. I think John Knightley's opinion on going to visit people and having occasions is a little bit more curmudgeonly in the modern day than it would be at the time. I was pretty put out with it at first, but when he talks about them only discussing things they talked about the day before and the day after, and could talk about the day after, it did sort of click with me a bit that, I mean, back in the time period, a lot more time would be spent in talking and socialising. So it is quite likely that they would have more of each other's company. So cancelling an occasion such as this would make more sense, because you'd be more well acquainted with your neighbours than people tend to be in them nowadays. So maybe it's not quite as an unreasonable position as it sounds. Though I think it is meant to be an unreasonable position, and as is Mr. Elton's, well, it's fine if we get snowed in for a week, it'll be fun, sort of position. I think the two sides are meant to be equally absurd. That being said, let's see, I do. Well, we've been going pretty well, but I do not want to end on chapter 13 because that's bad luck. So we'll press on for one more chapter, I think, and then call it. So, moving on to chapter 14. Some change of countenance were necessary for each gentleman as they walked into Mrs. Weston's drawing room. Mr. Elton must compose his joyous looks, and Mr. John Knightley dispersed his ill humour. Mr. Elton must smile less, and Mr. John Knightley more, to fit them for the place. Emma only might be as nature prompted, and show herself just happy as she was. To her it were a real enjoyment to be with the Westons. Mr. Weston were a great favourite, and there were not a creature in the world to whom she spoke with such unreserve as to his wife, not any one to whom she related with such conviction of being listened to and understood, of being always interested and always intelligible. The little affairs, arrangements, perplexities and pleasures of her father and herself. She could tell nothing of Hartfield, in which Mrs. Weston had not a lively concern, and half an hour's uninterrupted communication of all the little matters on which the daily happiness of private life depends, one of the first gratifications of each. This for a pleasure which perhaps the old day's visit might not afford, which certainly did not belong to the present half hour. The very sight of Mrs. Weston, her smile, her touch, her voice, were grateful to Emma, and she determined to think as little as possible of Mr. Elton's oddities, or of anything else unpleasant, and enjoy all that were enjoyable to the utmost. The misfortune of Harriet's cold had been pretty well gone through before her arrival. Mr. Woodhouse had been safely seated long enough to give the history of it all, besides the history of his own and Isabella's coming, and of Emma's being the follower, and had indeed just got the end of his satisfaction that James should come and see his daughter, when the others appeared, and Mrs. Weston, who had been almost wholly engrossed by her attentions to him, were able to turn away and welcome her dear Emma. Emma's project of forgetting Mr. Elton for a while made her rather sorry to find, when they had all taken their places, that he were very close to her. The difficulty were great of driving this strange insensibility towards Harriet from her mind, while he not only sat at her elbow, but constantly obtruding his happy countenance on her notice, and solicitously addressing her upon every occasion. Instead of forgetting him, his behaviour was such that she could not avoid the internal suggestions of, "Can it really be as my brother imagined? Can it be possible for this man to be beginning to transfer his affections from Harriet to me? Absurd and insufferable. He would be so anxious for her being perfectly warm, would be so interested about her father and so delighted with Mrs. Weston, and at last would begin admiring her drawings with so much zeal and so little knowledge, it seemed terribly like a would-be lover, and made it some effort with her to preserve her good manners. For her own sake she could not be rude, and for Harriet's, and they hoped that all would yet turn out right, she was even positively civil, bitter in affront, especially as something was going on amongst the others, in the most overpowering period of Mr. Elton's nonsense, which she particularly wished to listen to. She heard enough to know that Mr. Weston were giving some information about his son. She heard the words "my son" and "Frank" and "my son" repeated several times over, and from a few other half-syllables very much suspected that he were announcing an early visit from his son. Before she could quiet Mr. Elton, the subject was so completely past that any reviving questions from her would have been awkward. Now, it so happened that in spite of Emma's resolution in ever marrying, there was something in the name and the idea of Mr. Frank Churchill which always interested her. She had frequently thought, especially since his father's marriage with Miss Taylor, that if she were to marry, he was the very person to suit her in age, character, and condition. He seemed, by this connection between the families, quite to belong to her. She could not but suppose it to be a match that everybody who knew them must think of. That Mr. and Mrs. Weston did think of it, she was very strongly persuaded, and though not meaning to be induced by him, or by anybody else, to give up a situation which she believed more replete with good than any she could change, or she could change it for, she had a great curiosity to see him, a decided intention of finding him pleasant, of being liked by him to a certain degree, and a sort of pleasure in the idea of their being coupled in their friends' imaginations. With such sensations, Mr. Elton's civilities were dreadfully ill-timed, but she had the comfort of appearing very polite, while feeling very cross, and of thinking that the rest of the visit could not possibly pass without bringing forward the same information again, or the substance of it, from the open-eyed Mr. Weston. So it proved. For when happily released from Mr. Elton and seated by Mr. Weston at dinner, he made use of the very first interval in the cares of hospitality, the very first leisure from the saddle of mutton, to say to her, "We want only 2 more to be just the right number. I should like to see 2 more here, your pretty little friend Miss Smith and my son, and then I should say we were quite complete. I believe you did not hear me telling the others in the drawing-room that we were expecting Frank? I had a letter from him this morning, and he will be with us within a fortnight." Emma spoke with a very proper degree of pleasure, and fully assented to his proposition of Mr. Frank Churchill and Miss Smith making their party quite complete. "He has been wanting to come to us," continued Mr. Weston, "ever since September. Every letter has been full of it, but he cannot command his own time. He has those to please who must be pleased, and who, between ourselves, are sometimes to be pleased only by a good many sacrifices. But now I have no doubt of seeing him here about the 2nd week in January. What a very great pleasure it will be to you, and Mrs. Weston is so anxious to be acquainted with him that she must be almost as happy as yourself." "Yes, she would be,
but that she thinks there will be another put-off. She does not depend upon his coming so much as I do, but she does not know the parties so well as I do. The case, you see, is, but this is quite between ourselves. I did not mention a syllable of it in the other rooms. There are secrets in all families, you know. The case is that a party of friends are invited to pay a visit at Enscombe in January, and that Frank's coming depends upon their being put off. If they are not put off, he cannot stir. But I know they will, because it is family that a certain lady of some consequence at Enscombe has a particular dislike to. Though it is thought necessary to invite them once in 2 or 3 years, they always are put off when it comes to the point. I have not the smallest doubt of the issue. I am as confident of seeing Frank here before the middle of January as I am of being here myself. But your good friend there, nodding towards the upper end of the table, has so few vagaries herself, and has been so little used to at Hartfield, that she cannot calculate on their effects, as I have been long in the practice of doing. I am sorry there should be anything like that in the case, replied Emma, but I am disposed to side with you, Mr. Weston. If you think he will come, I shall think so too. Do you know Enscombe? Yes, I have some right to that knowledge. I have never been at the place in my life. She is an odd woman, but I never allow myself to speak ill of her on Frank's account, for I do believe her to be very fond of him. I used to think she was not capable of being fond of anybody except herself, but she has always been kind to him, in her way, allowing a little whims and caprices, expecting everything to be as she likes. And it is no small credit, in my opinion, to him that he should excite such an affection. Although I would not say it to anybody else, she has no more heart than a stone to people in general, and the devil of a temper. Emma liked the subject so well that she began upon it, and Mr. Weston very soon after their moving into the drawing room, wishing her joy, observing that she knew the first meeting must be rather alarming. Mrs. Weston agreed to it, but added that she should be very glad to be secure of undergoing the anxiety of the first meeting at the time talked of, for I cannot depend upon him coming. I cannot be so sanguine as Mr. Weston. I am very much afraid that it will all end in nothing. Mr. Weston, I dare say, has been telling you exactly how the matter stands. Yes, it seems to depend upon nothing but the ill humour of Mrs. Churchill, which I imagine to be the most certain thing in the world. My Emma, replied Miss Weston, smiling, what is the certainty of caprice? And turning to Isabella, who had not been attending before, you must know, my dear Mrs. Knightley, that we are by no means so sure of being Mr. Frank Churchill, in my opinion, as his father thinks. It depends entirely upon his aunt's spirits and pleasure, and short upon her temper. To you, to my 2 daughters, I may venture on the truth, Mrs. Churchill rules at Enscombe, and is a very odd-tempered woman, and his coming now depends upon her being willing to spare him. Oh, Miss Churchill! Everybody knows Mrs. Churchill, replied Isabella, and I am sure I never think of that poor young man without the greatest compassion. To be constantly living with an ill-tempered person must be dreadful. It is what we happily have never known anything of. But it must be a life of misery. What a blessing that she never had any children. Poor little creatures! How unhappy she would have made them. Emma wished she had been alone with Mrs. Weston. She should then have heard more. Mrs. Weston would speak to her with a degree of unreserve which she would not hazard with Isabella, and she really believed would scarcely try to conceal anything relative to the Churchills from her, except in those views on the young man of which her own imagination had already given her such instinctive knowledge. But at present there was nothing more to be said. Mr. Woodhouse had very soon followed them into the drawing-room. The sitting long after dinner were a confinement that he could not endure. Neither wine nor conversation were anything to him, and gladly did he move to those with whom he were always comfortable. While he talked to Isabella, however, Emma found an opportunity of saying, "And so you do not consider this visit from your son by any means certain? I am sorry for it. The introduction must be unpleasant, whenever it takes place. The sooner it could be over, the better." "Yes, and every delay makes one more apprehensive of other delays. Even if this family, the Breakways, are put off, I am still afraid that some excuse may be found for disappointing us. I cannot bear to imagine any reluctance on his side, but I am sure there is a great wish on the Churchills to keep him to themselves. There is jealousy. They are jealous even of his regard for his father. In short, I can feel no dependence on his coming, and I wish Mr. Weston were less sanguine." He ought to come, said Emma. If he could stray only a couple of days, he ought to come. One can hardly conceive of a young man's not having it in his power to do as much as that. A young woman, if she fall into bad hands, may be teased, and be kept at a distance from those she wants to be with. But one cannot comprehend a young man's being under such a restraint, as not to be able to spend a week with his father if he likes it. One ought to be at Eastcombe and Enscombe, and know the ways of a family, before one decides upon what he can't do, replied Miss Weston. One ought to use the same caution, perhaps, in judging of the conduct of any one individual of any one family. But Enscombe, I believe, certainly, must not be judged by general rules. She is so very unreasonable, and everything gives way to her. But she is so fond of the nephew. He is so very great a favourite. Now, according to my idea of Mrs. Churchill, it would be most natural that, while she makes no sacrifice for the comfort of the husband, whom she owes everything, while she exercises incessant caprice towards him, she should frequently be governed by the nephew, to whom she owes nothing at all. My dearest Emma, do not pretend, with your sweet temper, to understand a bad one, to lay down rules for it. You must let it go its own way. I have no doubt of his having, at times, considerable influence, but it may be perfectly impossible for him to know beforehand when it will be. Emma listened, and then coolly said, I shall not be satisfied unless he comes. He may have a great deal of influence on some points, continued Miss Weston, and on others very little. And among those on which she is beyond his reach, it is but too likely it may be the very circumstance of his coming away from them to visit us. And that's the end of chapter 14. So, I think we should call that the last one, so I'll move over to my little comfortable bed while we do our little bit of last analysis. Again, I won't do anything too in-depth because I've been to do a whole summary of the novel at the end, but it seems to me that Emma is finally starting to get the idea that maybe Mr. Elton is not quite so enamoured with her dear friend Harriet as she had hoped, and that perhaps, just perhaps, there is something to be had in the views of the two Mr. Knightleys. I think she's still yet to give the original Mr. Knightley real credence. But yeah, and it seems pretty, well, I wouldn't say pretty, I'd say at this point it's fairly obvious to the reader at least that Mr. Elton is more enamoured with Emma than with Harriet, given the textual evidence presented. Other than that, the general summary has been... Actually, think about it, not too much has actually happened this these particular couple of chapters in terms of the story advancing. It's become more clear what is already going on, and of course, Isabella and Mr. John Knightley have come to visit, and the children are there, but the plot itself hasn't actually thickened that much. I mean, I suppose maybe Harriet getting sick will come to be more of a play in the thing, but yeah, not too many developments. Still, an interesting little one. We had a little scene of some polite arguments, which I do always like. Some more development of the world and the characters. I guess the introduction of the extended family. Sister's not really extended. I don't know of the other daughter anyway. And yeah, and some more development of Mr. Woodhouse's particular brand of hypochondria, which I still find quite funny. But it does, I think, in a couple of scenes, start to seem great. Is anyone live to raise it? Doesn't look like. Varys is live, but does look like he's got his closing screen on, so I don't want to. Oh, thank you very kindly. I'll be honest, I have considered putting up an actual head pat redeem, but because I move around between screens and quite often move, because I have to move between different books and move the thing, it will be quite difficult to set up properly. I don't know, I may see about setting one up so that it will work when I'm in here or somewhere where I'm less likely to move, but I'll have to give it some thought. Maybe figure out the link to do that anyway. I will look into it. But yeah. Oh. Well, thank you very kindly, Tanner. Now thank you, but I dearly wish it weren't cheese. If competition gets me more cheese, I can only encourage competition.
In the top list. I'm taking my place back.
Well, I can only respect it. I appreciate the sentiment, Wild, but the phrase "tickle the rat" does come across a little bit suggestive. So
I'm sure at some point that has been used as an innuendo, but I do genuinely appreciate it. Yeah. But yeah, I thank everyone for stopping by. I do really appreciate it. And yeah, I hope you've all enjoyed, or are enjoying, I guess, Emma, since it's still ongoing. I guess, actually, let's give a little bit of an account of where we are in the text. I think I estimated about 8 sessions to get through it. We're currently at page 145. I'm sure playing data. Yeah, okay, so it's about 430 pages, so yeah, probably, maybe more like 10 sessions, but yeah. And Plague, I appreciate your good humour and intentions. But yeah, again, I thank you everyone for showing up. I do genuinely appreciate it. And I'm very grateful for all of you having been here. I always feel like I should have something to say and to like sign off properly, but I never really do. I'm just very grateful. But yeah, probably something more general. You're very welcome. Well, actually, I didn't mention I did get some more books today. You can't really see them from the other reading scheme, but if you look over where the M.R. Jameses are, just underneath them, I got a new pile of. I basically went and picked up the rest of the Henry Jameses. So I've got quite a few of them to be going through, so those will probably be our default for the next little while. Yeah, you're all very welcome, and I very much appreciate you having been here. I hope you've enjoyed it. I wish you all a very pleasant rest of your day, night, evening, whatever time it is for you. Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, I do like the main library screen. Like, what do you call it? You're all very welcome. Like, it's one of my favourite little things about the stream is just the way it develops over time. You can see more and more books coming into it. Like, it's nothing special, but it just develops, and I like it. Yeah, I do thank you all for being here. I do hope you have a lovely rest of your time, and I'm always very appreciative of it. Yeah, I hope you all the best. Probably back tomorrow with some ghost stories, but until that time, I wish you all the very best. I thank you all for being here, and as always, ta-ra.